Thank you very much for your time. It's an honor that you join me for this interview. If I can please start with first question, I would love to devote some time to Ukraine. So we are seeing in the Western media more and more that stalemate has come to Ukraine. And it's surprising that also Western media has started noticing this kind of sort of no advancement in the counteroffensive of Ukraine. And, you know, we are also, of course, hearing what Zelenskyy is saying. They are asking for more money. What do you think is going to happen next? How is this going to have an impact on that the Western media are noticing?
Well, I think that Western media have just picked up obvious things that we have been seeing for quite some time, and that Ukrainian counteroffensive, so-called counteroffensive, is not moving forward, to put it mildly. There were too many expectations centered on it, but the situation on the ground is absolutely different from what the West, who is behind Kiev regime, was expecting. And this is of course not something that happened because of good luck, because this is big work, painstaking efforts of our military. And as recently was confirmed by our leadership, that the special military operation is going ahead in accordance with the aims that were there since the very beginning. So this is not unexpected for us. This is unexpected maybe to some of Western observers and journalists who were betting too much on Zelenskyy regime, and who's all of a sudden, without any reasons, started to believe in this futile attempt of Zelenskyy regime to inflict defeat on Russia. We absolutely, from the first moments, were sure that there are no reasons whatsoever, and no basis for such a hope. But now I think more and more people in the West are coming to the same conclusion. And of course, an open issue for them would be what will happen next. But it is for them, not for us, because we are continuing as we were doing before. We are saving manpower. We are eliminating Ukrainian reserves. There are a lot of people who are surrendering and who are saving their lives. And we have started our offensive, I think, around 1 month ago. It's not going to be a blitzkrieg, that's quite clear, but it's very, very gradual and logistically reasonable advance, which is happening in several areas of the front line. And I think that the situation will be developing in the nearest future, and it will bring even more sleepless nights to those who was betting on Zelenskyy regime.
Yes, thank you. But what do you think the US is going to do? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you think, you know, you have probably heard that mostly the Republicans are starting to notice that it actually doesn't make much sense to pay the taxpayers' money and send them over to another country where they don't know where it's going. Do you think that if the US will stop this trend of giving aid, other countries are going to follow?
Well, it was obvious from the outset that the only way for Kiev regime to continue its military activity against Russia was in the support of the West, and first and foremost the United States of America. We pointed out at several meetings in the Security Council that Zelenskyy has already squandered several armies, and the West is continuing to supply more and more weapons. And several other political figures admitted that it was only because of Western support that Kiev regime was still able to fight. The only thing that it is now being short of, it's manpower, and that's obvious because people don't want to be cannon fodder. And you know how the conscription is happening in Ukrainian territories. It's not a secret right now. But I don't think that the strategy of someone in my country would be to bet on on the fact that this flow of Western aid will stop. We bear it in mind, but it's not our calculation. We understand that the West, who was the creator of Kiev regime, who was behind the military, the illegal anti-constitutional coup in 2014, will try to do everything it can to keep it afloat and to support it with whatever means they need. So we don't count on this factor. We have enough of tools, of leverage, and of possibilities in our own hands to conclude this campaign and to have a victory and to achieve the aims of our special military operation.
Zelenskyy also stopped mulling the idea that there will be elections next year. Do you think that Ukraine as a state will still exist?
We were never threatening Ukraine as a state. We were never threatening Ukrainians as people. From the outset, I think that was a very bad propaganda invention of the West, that if Ukraine stops to fight, there will be no Ukraine. I don't know where they really took it from. We were always very much friendly towards our Ukrainian neighbors, and there was always good cooperation until this unfortunate moment when in 2014 the new regime came to power, and Zelenskyy, as you know, was elected against Mr. Poroshenko in 2019. But you know that he was elected because of the slogans that he was promoting, and these slogans were peace with Russia, no more war, equal rights to Russian speakers. And the moment he came to power, he forgot about it and he started to act in absolutely opposite direction to the pleasure of his Western puppeteers. So I heard about Zelenskyy's statement on elections, that there will be no elections actually next year. That's what I heard. He said that it's not the time now for the elections, that it will be only for Russia's pleasure and blah, 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 all these things. I don't want to comment it. It's internal Ukrainian problem and issue. Let Ukrainians assess what their president is doing. But of course, it's very much to the contrary of what the Western backers of Zelenskyy are saying, claiming that Ukraine is a democracy, that all the democratic processes are there, that Zelenskyy is also a very democratic leader. I think that's very clear from what he does and from the number of political prisoners that he has thrown into prison, from all these absolutely draconic measures that he is introducing in his country, and he was doing it even before the special military operation. It's quite clear what kind of democracy Ukraine is now building, and I think it's obvious to every observer.
Thank you. And now, if we look at the UN, Russia often calls for meetings in the UN Security Council on Western weapon deliveries, while the Western countries are calling more on the humanitarian aspects of the crisis. What is going to be your strategy now at the UN in terms of meetings and in terms of Ukraine?
Well, we call for the meetings on Western weapons deliveries and their role in the in finding prospects for peaceful resolution of Ukrainian crisis, only because of the fact that our Western colleagues do not want to look into the mirror and to analyze these aspects of this problem. So we have to counterbalance their attempts to call meetings on everything that Kiev regime is trying to bring to the Security Council without even checking the facts. There were several occasions when the meetings were called on absolutely false pretext, and later on it was quite clear that it was Zelenskyy regime who is behind this or that number of casualties, because you know that we make only precision strikes on energy infrastructure, on infrastructure related to Ukrainian military capacity. We want to diminish this capacity. We also strike objects where the Ukrainian military tried to hide military equipment, artillery, shells, everything like this. So it's quite clear that when there are detonations in some kind of, for example, grain elevator, it's absolutely clear that it was not grain that was stockpiled there. So it's quite clear that all the casualties, all the strikes that target civilian infrastructure, they are the result of very faulty work of Ukrainian air defense. Either the rockets fall themselves, or these are the debris that are being that are hitting buildings and other things. It happened, I think, the day before yesterday in Odessa, when there were a lot of footage from Ukrainian air defense missiles going directly into the city, and it was absolutely senseless, useless to deny it. That's why Ukrainian regime didn't ask for any meetings. But on the contrary, we do not only concentrate on highlighting this issue of weapons deliveries. For example, we 1 hour ago we called for an emergency meeting of UN Security Council because of Ukrainian strikes of Donetsk that happened today. It was very intensive shelling with Western weaponry. I think it was with HIMARS missiles, as far as I heard, and there were 6 people dead at least, several buildings destroyed, and a lot of people wounded. So we called for this emergency meeting. I don't know how our Western colleagues will react to this during the meeting, but the meeting is due to happen on November 8 at 3 p.m. New York time. It means 11 p.m. Moscow time. So we do not only concentrate on this topic, we also will continue to raise such issues as oppression of Orthodox Church, of canonical Orthodox Church, which is happening in Ukraine every day, and there are more and more indications that Zelenskyy regime tries to intimidate the believers, and it's absolutely runs counter to any basic notions of the freedom of faith and freedom of belief. So we will also have it in the focus of our attention. There are many other aspects that we are ready to highlight in the UN. There is some kind of a misperception that Russia is against discussing Ukrainian Security Council. To the contrary, if you look at the statistics, you will see that we have called maybe for half of the meetings on Ukraine, maybe even more. So it's not that something that we are kind of allergic to discuss Ukrainian issues in the Security Council.
Nobody thought that you're allergic to discussing Ukraine. On that note, should we expect any kind of resolution on Ukraine Russia would like to see?
We don't see any conditions for this, any background. What kind of resolution can we expect right now? You remember when there were humanitarian issues tackled by our Western colleagues, and they proposed a resolution. I think it was at the beginning of this crisis, of this hot stage of the crisis. We proposed our own, which we didn't contain any naming and shaming, but which had only humanitarian provisions in it, but it wasn't acceptable to our Western colleagues. So I think there is no ideas. There are no ideas of any resolutions
that could be passed
at this stage. Yes, that's not to my knowledge, at least.
Now, if I can please quickly move to Gaza. Of course, Gaza is highly discussed within the UN. Do you feel like it is taking the attention which Ukraine issue had, and now it's moving to Gaza? At least for outsiders like myself, it feels a bit like that.
Yeah, that's visible that the focus of attention here in the UN is mostly on Gaza, because of course the crisis in Gaza, the actions of Israeli military has highlighted the double standards of our Western colleagues, who didn't want to discuss it and who don't want to condemn Israel. We, from the outset, were quite clear about this, that we condemn unequivocally the attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October. There can be no justification for them for this such a cruelty. But at the same time, we, in the same way, unequivocally condemn the violations of international humanitarian law that Israel since then was making in Gaza, because the pictures from Gaza, the sufferings of population, the numbers of victims, especially children, is absolutely something that we can't accept. We all can't accept this. And against this background, again, our Western colleagues who were crying wolf in many cases in Ukraine, and where the situation was, to put it mildly, much more questionable, and when there were many more nuances to this situation, they do not even dare to call spade a spade when it comes to Israeli action. And I think that's why this topic is now very, very much on top of the agenda in the United Nations, especially after the emergency special session, the 10th emergency special session adopted the General Assembly resolution on Gaza, which I think is very important and which contains a lot of very important messages from the majority of international community that really calls a spade a spade.
Thank you. Could we quickly look at the resolution? It's like the 5th attempt to pass a resolution, if I'm not mistaken. What are the main obstacles right now? Is it the US not wanting to actually wanting to include the condemnation of Hamas, or what's the biggest obstacle?
Well, if we speak about General Assembly, that was the first.
No, Security Council, sorry.
The Council, yes, it made 4 attempts of passing a resolution, and now the elected 10 are also working on some kind of a text, but the obstacle is quite clear. It's really the position of the United States, as you rightly put it, because United States doesn't want any action from the Council that would jeopardize Israel's ground operation in Gaza. So they don't want to hear about anything resembling a call for a ceasefire, but a call for the ceasefire is what 99.9% of international community is expecting from Security Council right now. And they don't want any condemnation of Israel in the resolution. They want only condemnation of Hamas, and they pretend that it was kind of an unprovoked action. They don't use this word anymore, but they were using it a month ago, in the same way as they were speaking about alleged Russia's unprovoked aggression or war of aggression in Ukraine, which we debunked, of course, several times, because it didn't happen in the vacuum, as the situation in Gaza didn't happen in the vacuum. So United States so far are very much blocking all these attempts to come to common position. Western allies of the United States don't want to put United States in an awkward position. They don't want to display disagreements, but this is an open secret, and it was quite clear from, if I'm right, from the Brazilian draft, when Brazil proposed the draft resolution, and which was vetoed by the United States. Only UK abstained, and Russia abstained as well, because our amendments didn't pass. We were not happy with the text, but we were ready to let it go because of the urgent need of humanitarian agencies in Gaza. And at that moment, even European allies of the United States voted in favor of this resolution. So US was isolated. Also, the situation in the General Assembly was very much similar, where EU was split. I think 5 countries voted against the resolution, 5 countries in favor, the others abstained. So again, they don't want to put it to display all these divergences in public, but the divergences and even chasms are there. They are inconceivable. So I would say that this situation so far hasn't brought us somewhere where we would be ready to adopt a text without United States blocking it once again.
Oh, I see. So no foreseeable future resolution is on the table,
Well,
basically.
I wouldn't bet on it because the situation develops very quickly, and there are many factors that can actually influence the whole process. So it's not hopeless. But so far, it seems that Security Council, unfortunately, is paralyzed because of this position of the US and the desire of its closest allies not to put US in the awkward position by exposing it once again with some kind of a text which the others would like to adopt.
Thank you. Is there time for 2 more quick questions?
Okay, maybe one for sure. Let's try.
Okay, thank you. So how would you evaluate the relations between Russia and Israel at the moment? Because, of course, Russia has its own position on Hamas. Do you think it has an impact on the relations with Israel?
For us, if you ask me, nothing has changed. It's not that we all of a sudden started to be critical of Israel after the 7th of October. I think we were always critical of what Israel was doing in the occupied territories, and Israel was aware of our criticism. They might have been regretting this in private meetings, that we are not taking into consideration their grievances and their positions, but they knew that Russia is not approving what was being done with the Palestinians and with all the settlements. Of course, this was absolutely something unacceptable, not only to us, but to the majority of international community due to the very clear decisions and resolutions adopted by the Security Council. So there is a reason for this. We were also very critical from the outset, and you can check it with our statements before this crisis started, critical of the US and of the efforts to try to solve Palestinian issue through bilateral diplomacy with several Arabic states, leaving absolutely outside of the scope the Palestinian issue and the fair settlement of Palestinian problem. So if I may just streamline it a little bit, to achieve economic peace with Israel at the expense of Palestinian problem, Palestinian issue, there were some advances. You remember that it was Trump's investment, Trump's child, which was then borrowed by Biden administration, I think, in its entirety. And we were very critical of this. We were predicting from the outset that it will bring us to a crisis, and then this crisis happened. So I think our Israeli friends cannot reproach us of being inconsistent in our approach. As for them, it's very difficult for me to judge, but I see that, of course, the mood in Israel is very much different from the mood that we have in many other countries. It's very clear, even from the way the Israel permanent representative behaves in the UN. They seem to be in absolutely other reality, very emotional, and they are very much like an open nerve to any criticism of their attempts to, as they put it, to do away with Hamas and with Islamic terrorism. But there are certain things that we can't accept there in this way to achieving this aim. And we think that cooperation of international community in any case is necessary for any moves within the Palestinian-Israeli settlement. The roadmap is quite clear. It's two states living in peace with each other within the borders of 1967. And we all know that this is the only way to avoid problems that we are having right now. So I believe that at some point of time, our Israeli friends will understand that their emotions were too high vis-a-vis Russia, that Russia is doing nothing outside of the usual rhetoric towards Israel. And again, the Israeli ambassador once during last month reproached some countries looking at us with his eyes very, with a bit of anger, saying that some countries don't want to pass a resolution which would condemn Hamas, forgetting that the resolution that I mentioned, the Brazilian draft, which we were ready to let go, we were abstaining. contained condemnation of Hamas. We wanted to balance it with the condemnation of Israel's actions in Gaza, but our amendment was not supported. And regardless of this, we didn't vote against. We voted to abstain. So it was the United States who actually prevented the position of the Council that would condemn the actions of Hamas. So I think that in Western Jerusalem, they need to reproach their American partners for this and not Russia.
Okay, thank you.
And last question.
Oh, I can. Awesome, thank you.
It's very short
yes,
one.
very short. So I was wondering, what do you think about recent actions of Canada? You know, first of all, of course, we saw that they were secretly or openly celebrating former Nazi officer Hanka, and now they opposed your resolution, which was meant to combat Nazism. How would you interpret these actions? Do you think they sort of lack education or history, or is there some kind of higher level narrative?
It's not a revelation for me or my colleagues, for those who deal with these issues of international relations. It's an open secret that Canada harbored a lot of former Nazi collaborators after the Second World War, and these collaborators, of course, now have children and grandchildren. They have think tanks. So the neo-Nazi ideology or nationalist ideology, unfortunately, is very much it has very much clout in Canada. This is something that I think it's obvious. And this situation in Canadian Parliament maybe was something unexpected for most of international community, but it wasn't unexpected for us, because there were dozens of occasions when Canada was behaving in the way those people, those descendants from Nazi collaborators, their grandchildren, were promoting. And the Trudeau government is to a large extent hostage. It's not kind of withstanding it and not protesting, but it has to adopt a lot of policies, for example, towards Ukraine, which are explained by the position of these very nationalist, very neo-Nazi elements. So this is not a revelation for us. And I think that after the end of our special military operation, the world opinion will learn a lot about what's really happening in Ukraine and in Canada and in some other countries where the Nazi collaborators are openly glorified. So if we compare this situation in Canada, where only one person was brought to parliament and there was an attempt to glorify him, to honor him, and this created a public outcry. So nobody is creating any outcries with the fact that Bandera and Shukhevich, very renowned Hitler collaborators, who have on their hands the blood of hundreds of thousands of Jews, of Russians, of Poles, of Ukrainians, of Gypsies. They are being praised as heroes in today's Ukraine, and each and every day there are monuments erected to persons of a lower rank who were fighting alongside with Hitler, killing Jews, and who were perpetrators of Holocaust. All these things are exposed by many people. I would recommend everyone, for example, to follow the Twitter of Edward Dalinsky, the head of Ukrainian Jewish Committee, who is chronicling on daily basis almost all these small events to low profile Nazi collaborators, not such monsters, such renowned monsters as Bandera and Shukhevich, but those who were Burgermeisters, for example, or who were commanding some kind of a regiment. So these things are very widespread, and Canada is actively supporting them. And the things that we saw in the Ukrainian, in the Canadian Parliament is only a tip of an iceberg. And if Canadian society would dig deeper, I think there are a lot of secrets to be revealed, which would be absolutely unpleasant for majority of Canadians who try to close the eyes on what is the real past or the real intentions of those who promote this nationalist Ukrainian ideology.
Okay, thank you very much. Sounds like we can expect, unfortunately, more of this. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure was mine.
Yeah.